Awesome. Welcome to the Mobile App Chat Podcast. I am your host, Steve P. Young, and I've got two awesome guests for you today. I've got Alex Freedman, who's a Senior Manager of Analytics, and Mike Rowland, who's the Lead Engineer of Partner Integrations of Flurry. And I'm super excited to have you both on because we're going to talk all about mobile analytics and what you should be doing to make sure you're properly tracking the right elements, the right analytics within your apps. Alex, Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
Cool. So just for everybody, I think we know who's Alex and who's Mike, but this is Mike. Mike, you got to say something, Mike. This is...
Oh, hey guys. I'm waving at the camera. Hi,
there
Steve.
is a video element as well for those who are listening, because we're going to talk a lot about, how to integrate, and there's going to be some code. So there's a video element. If you want to check that out, you can go to mobileappchat.com/Flurry, and you'll find the show notes to it. And here's Alex.
Hi, everyone.
Cool. All right, Mike, Alex, I'll leave it up to you guys.
All right. Thank you, guys. As Steve said, my name is Mike Rowland, and with me is Alex Freedman. We both work for Flurry. Alex, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. So this is Alex. I am responsible for developing and retaining key clients for Flurry, and I work with some of our biggest clients on their mobile business strategy, and down to the nitty-gritty of their data to the high-level questions that they have in mobile.
Sure, and my name is Mike Rowland. I'm a lead engineer with the partner integration team. I am responsible for getting people integrated into the Flurry platform. That can span from just integrating the SDK all the way up to integrating systems. So it's a fun job to have.
Cool. So today we're going to take you through a presentation, but before we get into how to acquire the best users and how to retain users, we wanted to just give you a very brief overview of what is Flurry Analytics, just to set the tone for today. So we have one slide up for those who can see it. You can see a couple of interesting stats about Flurry. We're the #1 player in mobile analytics today. We're tracking 1.2 billion monthly unique users on our platform, which basically means that we're able to see data on 90% of the world's smartphones and tablets. We have about 155,000 app developers using our analytics product, 500,000 apps total, and we're tracking 1.3 trillion monthly events. And events are essentially actions that you can track within an app. For example, if a user makes a purchase or gets to the next level in a game. And you can see some of the brands that we're working with on the right side there. We're working, because we're working with 500,000 apps, we're working with from the smallest 1 or 2 person app shop to some of the largest brands.
Cool. Yeah, it's great to see some past guests of mine on the logos as well. Shazam,
Nice.
And I think the other one that I saw, Smule, was a past guest as well.
Yeah.
So, good stuff.
Very good. Both good partners.
Yeah.
So we're going to go over a few topics today. One of the things, the first thing we're going to talk about is you need to know your data. Your data is very important, and it can tell you a lot about the second topic that we're going to lead into, which is how to identify your most valuable users. Now, your most valuable users might be people that you can monetize, or your most valuable users might be people that bring more people into your ecosystem. And using the data that you set up in the first section, you'll be able to capture who are your most valuable users. And then the third thing we're going to show you how to do is how to measure success. So once you've identified your most valuable users, we're going to take you into what are the ways that you can continue to capture them using some of the other tools that Flurry has. So right now we're going to hit know your data. And so, what are the basic metrics that every app should track, right? So if you're going to use analytics, what do you need to know? What are the table stakes? What are the things that have to come right out of the box? Well, you need to know new users. You need to know sessions. You need to know active users, and you need to know retained users. Those are very basic to being able to do anything. And so, for instance, let's take sessions. What if you release a new version, and as a result, you introduce a crash, and you may or may not know about it, but you can watch your sessions, and all of a sudden you notice a session dip. well, that could be an indication that there's a problem, and so that kind of data can be very valuable. Or conversely, what happens if you launch a new feature and all of a sudden your number of new users go through the roof? Well, that's a great indication that maybe you're really onto something hot and you should continue doing what you're doing. But
Hey, Mike.
Yeah, go ahead.
So all this stuff is in Flurry, right? Once we get that integrated, all this new mobile user sessions, all these four things that you kind of laid out, they're all part of it already.
Yes, as a matter of fact, all this is a basic function of the actual Flurry integration. So just by including the SDK, you get this right out of the box. And the basic integration is extraordinarily easy. In some cases, it's just a couple lines of code. So yeah, that's a very good point. You do get this right out of the box with Flurry, and quite a few other things as well. So
cool.
Yeah, I'll also jump in there really quickly. So the metrics that Mike just walked through are some of the basic usage and technical metrics. So all of the new user sessions, active user data are just the first section of various different groups of data that you can have in Flurry. We also have audience and performance metrics where you can understand what users are doing cross-app, what categories that they're spending time in, what their age and gender is, geography, language, in addition to other features like crash analytics and user acquisition analytics.
But that is just the basics. You probably want to know things that pertain specifically to your application. And so we, in Flurry parlance, call these events, and I think that's a pretty common term throughout the industry. So, when would you want to capture an event? Well, you want to capture an event based on the business goals of your application. So let's say you're interested in when a user makes a purchase. You probably want to capture that as an event. Maybe you're a game, you want to know when a user completes a level, because if the user completes a certain level, you're going to consider them to be very engaged. Maybe you have a very strong social component, so you want to know shares on Facebook. Well, you can log an event for that. There's all kinds of things that you can log events for. It's pretty wide open. With the Flurry system, you can not only log events, but you can capture parameters around it and later slice and dice your metrics based on those parameters. And that leads us into how granular can events and parameters be. Well, it turns out that not only can you have an event, and so with this particular event, we're looking at an episode watched, and it turns out that we're going to be watching an episode of Nashville, so we're going to log the event that we're watching Nashville. And then we're going to capture two different parameters. We're going to capture the episode number, which could be the first episode of Nashville, which is fantabulous and very good. And we're gonna log the duration of that watch, and that's one of the things you can do with Flurry is you can track durations of events. And so each parameter can have multiple values. It could be episode 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10, or maybe most people are going to watch for the full. I guess it's 40 minutes. But maybe some people only watch for 15 minutes. Maybe that wasn't an interesting episode, or the music wasn't quite as good. But you can parameterize your events such that you can capture a lot of extra information. And so you can also reuse events as a result over and over, which is important because in the Flurry system you do get a total of 300 events. Once you hit that 301st event, you're no longer able to capture data beyond. So what are some sample events that you might have in game apps? So if you're in a game, the level that you're playing, and so as soon as the level starts, you might trigger an event that says user started level 1. The parameters might include the level played, the level started, or the level restarted. You might want to know timing. How long does it take the user to play level 1? Things like that. Or what about navigation events? Maybe you've got a tutorial in your system, in your app, and you want to know which step they're on and how long it's taking them to get through each step. And so you might log an event that says, they're in step 3 and the duration is 5 minutes. And in fact, you designed it so that step 3 would take a minute, and so now maybe you know that you've got a problem on step 3 or something that's concerning or confusing to the user. Monetization is a really big one. you want to know every single step of the funnel around when your user is entering a monetization thing. So you want to know that the user taps on the buy, the buy button. You want to know that the user has selected the number of coins or the level or the thing that you're interested in. You want to know that the user has initiated the in-app purchase, and then you want to know that the user got to the end of the in-app purchase. And as we'll show an example later that was based on a real life thing. Tracking every single step of the way can actually show you some really valuable information when it comes to monetization. And then, like we mentioned earlier, social. Having your app spread by word of mouth is pretty important. And maybe you want to know when people share you on Facebook or when they pin you on Pinterest. And that would be a great type of event to capture. So,
hey Mike, so let's say we're gonna integrate Flurry. We've kind of built out the game already. Do you kind of recommend kind of going through all the important events and laying them down? Like maybe if I was doing this on the web, I would kind of look at the funnel and be like, all right, here's our funnel. Here are all the pages that we want to track. Should we do that before we even should we plan that out before we integrate any of this stuff beforehand?
It's quite funny. I normally talk about this later in the presentation, but in my position with what I do, I hear a lot of this. Hey, we really want to put Flurry into the app. We're about 2 days from submitting to the App Store. Can you help us figure out what to track? And you can do a good job in 2 days, but if you think about it from the beginning, if you think about the things that you know are going to be important to you or know are going to be valuable to you, and you implement those in the beginning, not only does it help you with your analytics implementation, but it's my firm belief that that helps you with your app development and your product development, because now you've identified the very important points within your app that you need to know about.
So you might even recommend somebody who's mocking things up. They've got the flow already done. Say, like maybe highlight certain things that they want tracked as events. Okay, cool. I like that. Love it.
Maybe you're a product manager and you've just heard about this great thing called analytics, and you've heard about Flurry and you hear that they do great analytics. And now you've got to go convince the developer to put it in. And I'm an engineer, I'm a developer. I know that we're all pretty much curmudgeons at heart. And you bring me something and you're like, well, what's it going to cost me to put in? And it turns out that the basic integration for Flurry is typically about 5 minutes. It's a little bit quicker on iOS. It's a little bit longer on Android. And we'll delve into that. But what we're showing right here is that a typical integration on Flurry is you import flurry.h. And your application did finish launching with options. You call Flurry start session along with the API key, which you get off the dev portal, and you've integrated Flurry. Every time that app launches, Flurry is going to be initialized, Flurry is going to start collecting analytics, and Flurry is going to be available for you to throw events at. If you want to get into a full advanced implementation, it can take a few days, not necessarily weeks. And if you've got your roadmap laid out in advance, if you know what your business goals are, you could probably get it knocked out in about an hour. And so, the other thing to remember is that, Flurry Analytics is basically a software as a service model, and it doesn't require support from your IT department. Your IT department doesn't have to stand up a server. We maintain all that stuff for you, and we provide you the tools to get access to the data. So basic iOS integration, we kind of went over this a little bit on the other slide. If you look up at the top here, basic integration, application did finish launching with options. You get your API key, you call start session with the API key, and you're done. Of course, you got to import flurry.h, but that's not a big deal. For events, it's a little bit more in depth, but it's still pretty simple. You basically have the event itself, and you can pass in parameters to that event. The parameters are collected within a dictionary, and so you create the dictionary that's your parameters, and then the next step is you log the event with article read and with parameters, and you pass in the dictionary that you just created. There's a few caveats here. The dictionary must contain only strings, and you can have no more than 10 parameters. And the reason for that is that at some point you've got to kind of limit the data that you collect, and it has to be easy to work with. And obviously, if we let people log 100 parameters, there would be people that would do it. And that tends to make the processing pretty complex on the backside. So you only get 10 parameters, and they have to be strings.
Hey, Mike, how many platforms do you integrate with? Like, I know you guys are on Corona, and in the mastermind, we were kind of going through Flurry integration, and with Corona, it was super easy too. It's like one line. But what other platforms do you guys integrate with?
Well, let's see. We're integrated with most of the major platforms. We've got Unity integrations. We've got Corona. We've got Titanium. It's Accelerators Titanium. I know that there are some Cocos 2D modules out there. Typically, if anybody wants to integrate on just about any kind of a modern platform, you can do it. There's Mono Touch. There's all kinds of different things. Now the thing that's worth noting is that typically those efforts are community supported. Flurry, we're only like 120 people. We can't necessarily write an adapter for every platform that's out there because there are quite a few platforms. So what we'll typically do is provide resources and capabilities to the communities themselves in order to have them build it for themselves.
Cool.
So what does an Android integration look like? Now, Android is, the function, the structure of an iOS app is that you always enter and exit the application through the same point, which is the application did finish launching with options method. On Android, because of the activity structure, that's not the case. On an Android application, you can actually enter the app on any of the number of activities that are within the application itself. And so that changes the integration just a little bit. The basic integration on Android is that on every activity's onStart method, you make a call to onStart session with your API key. And on every activity's onStop method, you make a call to onEnd session. Now, one real successful approach we've seen people take to doing this is that they create a subclass of the basic activity, and they call it something like Flurry activity. And that handles the onStart and onStop method calls for them. And that tends to be a really good way to make sure that your Flurry integration is sound. Now, what about events? It's almost exactly like the iOS events themselves. You basically log an event, you give it a string name, and you pass in a hash map instead of a dictionary, but they're basically the same thing. And you can put up to 10 parameters in there, and all the parameters and values must be strings. So, any questions so far? All right. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about identifying your most valuable users. Do you want to kick this one off, Alex?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. So one very important question that we get asked all the time by app developers and lots of big brands that we work with is how to identify and acquire valuable users. And there are a lot of different ways to do it. We have two in mind for today to really understand the different segments and personas or behavioral groups within your audience and be able to effectively use that understanding to acquire more of them. So I'll start out with segments. So segments in Flurry allows you to analyze how a different group that uses your application varies in usage and behavior. So for example, if you have a game, you may want to understand how users who reached level 3 in the US differ from users who reached level 3 in another country, for example, Germany. And with segments, you can actually create segments in Flurry for both groups and then examine all of the metrics in Flurry Analytics for each of these segments independently and be able to compare them. And so you're able to create a whole variety of segments within Flurry. Some powerful examples that we've seen customers use recently are paying versus non-paying customers, or casual versus power users, or demographic-defined segments like men versus women. And then once you've built those segments in Flurry, you can use this information to plan your next acquisition campaign and try to acquire users that are most engaged in your app, or package key parts of your audience to sell directly to advertisers. And there are a variety of different ways that you can segment your audience in Flurry. One way is cohorts. So you can understand a group of users based on their acquisition date or when they first started using your app. A second way is by usage level. So you can define a group of heavy, regular, or infrequent users and really define that however you want. The third way is you can define a segment based on events. So as Mike mentioned, an event is any action that a user takes in your app, and you can have a segment of users that completed 1, 2, 3 events, or even parameters of the events for any value you specify, and have a group of users that have made a purchase of X denomination. The fourth way to build a segment, as I mentioned, is using demographics and geography. So you can have an age, gender, location, language-based segment. And then the final way is by acquisition source. So if you're tracking user acquisition channels and campaigns in Flurry, you can actually see how those users acquired in a particular channel or campaign perform and engage in your app.
Hey, Alex.
So yeah.
How do you get demographic data?
Yeah. So we actually
we use a couple different methods. There are some self-reported demographic apps. So typically a dating app might be interested in reporting that you're a male or a female, or what your age is, or things like that. And we are able, because of the data that we have in the data store that we have, and the fact that we do see so many apps, to start taking this core set of data, these small, a particular dating app that passes up age and gender, and start extrapolating that using some pretty complex models over to other users. And so we're actually able to give you pretty reliable estimates based on the apps that you use and the other data that we've collected from various sources. So it's actually pretty cool. And I remember I was around when we first started developing it, and I signed up to say, okay, do you think you can peg me? It was kind of a challenge from Dave Latham, who's our chief architect. Let me see if I can peg you. And so I gave him my information, and he put me into the system, and it popped out that here I am. I'm a male between the ages of 32 and 36. That's likely, I think it slid me into a couple personas that were pretty accurate. So I think in general this is pretty accurate information, and the models that it's based on are pretty complex. So.
Okay.
Yeah, one quick data point to offer there is that the size of our data pool is that we've collected age and gender information from 30 million users, which is an enormous sample compared to how a lot of other companies do it. So I think that this is by far the largest mobile data sample for age and gender data that we're using to base the estimates on.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. So the next key area that we typically look to really identify and acquire valuable users and understand which segments of your users are the most engaged and or the most valuable to target going forward are personas. And Flurry personas are basically behavioral profiles of your user base that allow you to understand more about your app audience and target them. And we have over 40 personas. You can see some of them listed here. We have business travelers, new moms, fashionistas, hardcore and mid-core gamers. And personas are based on actual mobile usage across nearly all of the apps that we track on over 1 billion devices. So we're really able to see, for a specific user, which group they fit into based on a number of different apps that they use. And we get asked a lot, how do personas work? So basically, each persona is based on a basket of apps that we're tracking that are representative of the interest and behavior of that audience group. So for example, the sports fan persona includes apps that let users check sports scores and read sports news and engage in fantasy leagues and that kind of thing. And users of a given app are added to a persona when their most recent activity indicates a very high level of usage across one or more apps in that basket of apps. So for example, for me to fit into the sports fan persona, I would have to generate more than 25 times as many sessions as the average mobile user in that type of app. So we're really looking at the whale users here.
Love that.
Yeah, it's a very, very popular feature on the advertising side, and we see folks using persona data both as a way to understand more about the interests and needs of their users, and also to improve monetization in the app and increase ROI on marketing spend because you really know who's in there and what they're doing.
And so now we're going to talk about how do you measure your success. So you've gone through, you've instrumented your application, you've put analytics in, you've put events in, and you've taken that instrumentation and you've started to identify your most valuable users within your application. So now, how do you measure success and how do you start acquiring more of those users? And we actually have a tool that we call user acquisition analytics. And so this is typically a tool that would be used in some kind of an acquisition campaign. So the basics of it work like this. You identify an acquisition channel. So that acquisition channel can be somebody that's predefined, such as a jump tap or a millennial or a Flurry. And you can also identify a custom channel such as a web campaign or an email campaign. And each of these channels gets their own unique link that allows you to basically capture the click and the install because your app has Flurry analytics implemented. And when that install occurs, we can tell you who to attribute that install back to based on last click. Now, the great thing about this is that it can tie into all of your demographics, all of your Flurry information, and it allows you to determine who delivers the best quality. Now, one thing that you can do with user acquisition analytics is very interesting is that you can set up a campaign and you can go in and say, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but here we are in Jump Tap, Serious Sparrows Q3V1, and they've got 683,000 clicks, 15,000 installs, which is an install rate of 2.3%. But we have this quality metric over here, and that's pretty important because you can set a segment or an event or a funnel to highlight that a user is a quality user. And so, just getting to the install is one thing, getting beyond the install is something else entirely. And so let's say that you're a game which is, you're the Serious Sparrows game, and you want to know who makes it to level 3, and that's who you've determined as your quality user, because in your analytics and in your segments you may have determined that if anybody gets to level 3, they're actually very likely to conduct an in-app purchase. And so what you might see here is that, with the volume that you're looking at, it looks like this web campaign right here has the best conversion rate into your quality. So maybe you want to focus on your web campaigns a little bit more and reduce spending on some of the other campaigns that you're using. It's a pretty straightforward product. You set it up in the dashboard. You get a link that is used as part of the click. The user installs the app. The link takes them to the App Store. They install the app. As soon as they launch the app, Flurry records the app install, and then Flurry goes through a matching process depending on whether it's device identifier based or whether it's device fingerprinting based, and we match up the install with the click, and then we report on it in the system, and that reporting is generally available within 2 hours. Alex?
Sure. So another key way to measure success is by using the funnels feature in Flurry. And so for those who aren't entirely familiar with funnels, funnels track users as they execute a defined series of steps, allowing you to basically see how many users that started a given process ended up completing it. And so for those that did not complete the process, funnels show you at which step they exited, and you can use that as a feedback loop to understand how engaged users are in the events that matter to you. With funnels and Flurry, any event that you have set up in the app can be used to define a step. And then you can answer questions like, how many users that viewed the tutorial ended up finishing level 2, how did our last change to the confirmation process in our app affect the number of people that successfully registered, or how many users make an in-app purchase, within an hour, a day, or a week after launching an app. And the process that we're showing here is a hotel app, and you can see that in the first step, 75% of users were served a list of hotels, 35% then clicked to select a hotel, 20% entered their payment information, and then 17% in the final step confirmed the hotel. And so you could use the funnel feature to understand how many users are progressing along the different paths, which segments of users are progressing in different ways, and also really dive deep into particular steps and say, okay, why did 20% of people confirm their payment information and 17% end up getting actually confirmed by the hotel? Where did that 3% go, and what can we do to prevent that in our app? And then one final way to measure success is retention. And we have a variety of different retention metrics in Flurry. One very commonly used and new retention feature in Flurry is called return rate, which is essentially static retention. And this feature measures the percentage of your users who return to your app on a given day, week, or month post-install. And we look at this value by cohort group, which means based on when users first started using your app. And so this is a very important metric for a lot of folks we're working with. We also have a rolling retention metric, which allows you to group together a set of users by date and measure churn, as well as some other retention metrics. And we wanted to just point to these here because this is a very important way to really measure success in your user acquisition efforts, in your engagement efforts, and everything you're doing. How long are users staying with our app?
One thing I'd like to point out, and we actually have a blog post about this that's posted up on the Flurry blog, is that this is actually a pretty important thing to measure. We did a good cross-section of apps in an investigation, and we found that apps that can maintain over 50% of their users past month 4 have a much longer shelf life than those that can maintain less than 50% through month 4. And so that blog post is definitely well worth the check.
Okay, I'll link that to the show notes, Mike. If you can send that over to me, I'll put it in.
I sure can.
Great.
So some concluding thoughts. You need to collect the right data early on. This goes back to the point earlier. Don't let this be an afterthought. Don't come to me 2 days before launch and say, hey, Mike, we'd like to do this. If this is part of your thinking in advance, then you're going to have a much greater rate of return on this investment than if it's an afterthought. So think about it up front. The other thing is that use the data that you collect to know your most valuable users and then focus on acquiring those key users. That's going to differ from app to app, but in general, you should know who your most valuable users are based on the data that you're getting. And then, make it a cycle. Conduct ongoing assessments of goals and progress. You may find that what you thought were your most valuable users to begin with are not. And the data could tell you that. You may think that anybody that makes it to level 3 is going to be my most valuable user, but in fact, it's people that make it to level 5. So, you can adjust based on that and, start letting the data tell you how to build further into your app to further please your users. And so, we feel that if you can follow these key steps, you will in fact grow very well. So any questions?
Mike, I got a few, and for those who are listening live, please put it in the chat if you got some questions. But thank you so much, Mike and Alex. This was awesome. The question that I have is when you're going back to the quality metrics, and you said, you can say once a user hits a certain event, they become a qualified user, and you kind of see, and I forget what the slide is, but how many events can we have that say, hey, this is a quality user?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Alex. No, go ahead.
Sure. So basically, the quality metric allows you to define user quality your way. So, as Mike mentioned, beyond simply tracking the impressions, clicks, and installs, UAA enables you to measure the quality of acquired users in that table. And you can measure based on engagement, demographics, in-app actions, any segment or funnel of your choice. Now, within the current Flurry user interface, you can only put in one custom quality definition at the moment. We have a couple of others in there, like 3- and 7-day retention, but for now, you can only put one metric. However, because UAA is built right into the Flurry analytics interface, you can actually deeply measure your acquired users and analyze acquired cohorts any which way you want throughout the rest of the analytics product. So just because it's not in that table, you can get to any answer you want throughout the rest of the analytics product.
Got it.
Well, I was going to say, it's also worth mentioning that you can have different quality metrics for different campaigns too.
Okay.
So it's not just one quality metric across your whole app. As you're setting up each acquisition campaign, you can specify, well, for this acquisition campaign, I want this to be my quality metric. I want to know who gets to level 3.
Got it. So it's campaign based.
Yeah, it's campaign
okay.
based.
That makes a world. And so for those who are listening or even watching, UAA stands for User Acquisition Analytics within Flurry. The other question I have, and I love this dashboard because, I've seen some other people's dashboards, and it's insane where you can measure. But when you have a certain campaign that you set up, can that drill down to personas too?
That I don't believe that it can. I know that for like an event, for instance, you can see how personas shake out in an event. So personas are actually available throughout the dashboard that you can slice and dice based on personas. I can't answer that definitively right now, but I can get you an answer later.
Okay, great. And I think Margaret has a question. Margaret, I unmuted you.
Oh, thank you. Just on that personas, that's really interesting. I've got a travel app, and my Flurry personas tell me I've got 55% business travelers and 0 leisure travelers. So what's the difference between a business and a leisure traveler?
The question is, you have a very high percentage of business travelers and a low percentage of leisure travelers.
That's right.
And what drives the difference? Yeah. So basically, the reason for that difference is the definition of the two personas is based on different apps in Flurry. So business travelers might be based on apps that are typically only used for business travel, versus leisure travelers have different apps in the basket, and it really is just the math of how many sessions users are logging in each of those types of apps.
And do you publish that anywhere so that I can see the sorts of apps that a leisure traveler uses?
We have information on the types of apps and events and actions that can be taken in them, but we don't share the list of names of apps. I'd be happy to send that along to you, though, so you can see what types of actions those users are taking.
I'd be really interested in that. Thanks. If you can give Steve time.
Sure.
Cool. Eric, you got a question?
Yeah, I have a couple real quick. First one is, if we've talked to a couple other companies, we do use Flurry. That's our main for analytics and stuff. But we talked to some other ones, and they talk about being Facebook preferred vendors. These other analytics. Does that mean anything? Do they have any advantage, or do you guys have the same exact stuff? My assumption is it's just an advertising ID that's put into the advertisement, and then you match those up once the install's made. Is that? correct?
Yeah, so that actually pertains to user acquisition analytics, and whether or not you can use user acquisition analytics to track a Facebook campaign. And if we're not currently a certified vendor for Facebook, but there are plenty of uses for UAA outside of Facebook itself. And
Okay.
we actually have a lot of very large names that use user acquisition analytics for the majority, if not all, of their third-party tracking needs.
Okay. And my other question was update times. Are there particular times during the day when you guys update data? I look a lot on the Flurry website. I didn't know if it's set in stone, or maybe I'll stop checking every hour.
Yeah, it is not set in stone.
Okay.
Based on the architecture of our system, there's a lot of batch processing that goes on. So we'll tend to, collect a bunch of data into one place and then run jobs on top of that to process that data. And typically, for a piece of data that comes in, it really just depends on the job that's processing it for when it's going to be available. So, for instance, if you're looking at your dashboard and you want to know if you've integrated correctly, the quickest way to find that out is to actually log an event and go to your events page and the event logs. And typically within 5 to 10 minutes, you'll start to see the event logs rolling in. But now the job that actually breaks those event logs up and parses them out and shoves them into the other dashboards, those can take anywhere from 3 to 4 hours. And the same story goes for your new users, your active users, things like that. It's job based, and it's pretty much just dependent on when the job is finished. A typical safe answer is that the delay is going to be anywhere from 3 hours to 6 hours.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Cool. I think we got a couple more questions before we hit the big finish. Margaret, you had one question.
Just a quick one. I can see that my app's had a few errors and they're all coming through as uncaught. Is there any way to get more information on where they happened or what they could be?
We actually do offer crash reporting. Now, is this on iOS or Android?
iOS.
iOS. So the thing about crash reporting on iOS is, you could definitely use Flurry's crash reporting. If you do not currently have a crash reporting system in there, then I would recommend Flurry's for certain. On iOS, unfortunately, though, you can only have one crash reporter, and so you could, if you've already got one integrated, you wouldn't be able to integrate Flurry's. On Android, that's not the case. You can have multiple crash reporters. So, but yeah, we do offer a crash reporting option.
But sorry, I've got Flurry. It's telling me there's no crashes, but it's telling me I'm getting errors.
Are you logging errors?
I'm not the developer. I paid someone else to do it. So there they are
Okay.
logging. That's the thing.
Well,
I don't talk tech to me. I won't get it. But I can see I've got 5 errors.
Okay.
Apple iOS emulator, iPhone 4, and iPhone 4S. So
okay.
what do I say to my developer
Okay,
about how do you fix these errors?
let me back it up just a little bit. There's a couple ways that you can catch errors in general in the SDK. You can specifically log an error similar to how you would log an event. And that is, it's kind of the most rudimentary basic way of doing it. You can also set an uncaught exception handler, which kind of logs a default error if one bubbles up to the top and it's not caught. Or you can implement the full-fledged crash reporting option. And so it sounds to me like maybe you're not using crash reporting, and either the developer has logged specific errors or has allowed them to bubble up to the top and be caught by the uncaught exception handler. In which case, I would recommend going back to the developer and saying, could you tell me where these are coming from? And if you're looking to take it a step further, a really good idea might be, let's integrate some crash analytics so that we can see the exact details. The only problem with an error is that you really get minimal information because it's more of an event kind of a thing. You're limited to about 256 characters, and so unfortunately, you're just not going to get a lot out of an error. The error structure was really more geared towards quick, short messages, whereas crash reporting is very comprehensive.
Okay, so I need to ask him to set up crash reporting. Thank you.
No problem.
Well, Alex, Mike, this has been absolutely amazing, but let's go to the big finish. What is your favorite mobile app?
Alex, we'll let you go first.
Thanks, Mike.
Ladies first, right?
So I have a lot of favorites, but I guess, something that I miss in my daily life is a little bit of creativity, and the app that I've been using the most when I'm on the road or, on a plane, traveling, and looking for something to do quickly on the subway is this sketching app. It's called the Sui Sketch app, and you can make beautiful drawings, you can do watercolor painting, and I really just like it because I find it kind of fun and relaxing.
Oh, I like that. Never heard of that. What is it called again, Alex?
It's called Sui Sketches.
Sui Sketches. Okay. I'll have to get that from you.
I gotta see some of these sketches, Alex.
Yeah.
Oh, I will not be sharing my sketches. They're really not that skillful. But they look better than they otherwise would if I did them by hand.
That's awesome. Mike, you got one?
Yeah, I do. So right now I find myself using MyFitnessPal a lot. And one of the things I really like, I'm kind of on a health kick, is I like the fact that it integrates a lot of external sources, almost a huge ecosystem, and puts it into this one view that you can kind of look at to get almost a dashboard view of what your daily exercise and calorie intake and things like that has been. And I think it's a really powerful idea, and I kind of envy them that position. I think it's a great place for them to be.
Great. Alex, just for fun, give us a half-baked idea for an app, something you wouldn't mind someone else working on.
Sure. So I'm at the very beginning of a very stressful New York City apartment hunt, and I'm going from website to realtor to, I'm all over the place. And if somebody would just create a Tinder for Manhattan apartments, that would make my life easier.
I like it. Mike?
Yeah, so, I'm a father, and I've got an 8-year-old son, and he just finished up a baseball season. And we would get to the baseball field, and I've got 2 other kids, and everybody'd be like, we want some Big League Chew, which is a gum. And
Right.
If you're not familiar with it, Big League Chew comes in these pouches that are about the size of a child's head. And you tear the top off, and then it's made to look like chewing tobacco, which is really the signal you want to be sending your kid. But at the end of the game, all the kids are asking for Big League Chew, and we get to the end of the game, and there's like 7 or 8 kids that have taken 2 mouthfuls of Big League Chew, and they've all got this Big League Chew left over. And so I would love to see a sharing app so that you could get to the baseball field and log that you have Big League Chew and be able to share that with other people so that all the parents are not going out and buying Big League Chew.
Very niche app, Mike. I like that. What advice would you have? What advice would you give anyone looking to build a mobile app? Alex, you want to start?
My very quick advice would be track from day one. I think that, even though analytics may not be the main thing on your mind when you're launching your app, get something in there and even just passively track your data. If you're not looking at it for the first 6 months, so be it, but have it so that when you have a question and you want to make a change in the app or know who are your valuable users, you have that in your back pocket, and then you can use it.
That's great advice. Mike?
Yeah, and that's my answer too.
Okay.
You're going to put all this time and effort and heart and blood and sweat and tears into an app. And even if it's just for fun, you never know, you might just be the next Flappy Birds. And if you are, and you don't have a view into your analytics, you're going to be hampered in what you can do and how you build things out going forward. So that's mine too, is track things from the beginning.
Yeah, and you can't iterate if you don't have any data, because I made this mistake, and so I'm kind of going in blindly and revising my app a little bit, but not anymore. Alex, Mike, thank you so much. If the audience wants to learn more about Flurry and say thank you for coming on, where would they go?
They could obviously go to flurry.com, or they could tweet at Flurry Mobile, and that'd be a great way to get in touch with us.
Great. Alex, Mike, Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you all for listening. We'll see you at the next chat. And that's a wrap. Thanks, guys. That was awesome.